Namaskar, welcome. I'm with my friend and long-time associate Sankrant Sanu. As you can see, we have met in pretty serene surroundings. Hi Sankrant, it's always a great pleasure catching up with you.
Nice to see you.
How have you been doing?
Very well, very well.
So, this is, I'm catching up with Sankrant for a very informal kind of a chat. I won't call this exactly an interview. It's, an informal exchange of, let's say, conversation over some recent happenings in the country. So, I guess we can begin with what's hot in the news, the Sahitya Akademi Award Returns. So, Sankrant, this is not a question, like I said, it's a conversation. What seems to be happening?
Well, the way I look at it is that there is a big shift happening in the political landscape. You know, for so many years there was one party that was more or less in power. And for the first time, really, it looks like that party is not only not in power, but might not be coming back anytime soon. We don't know. We don't know. But at least that one party, it might not be. I mean, the BJP is currently in power. That might go away. Right. So I'm not saying that's going to stay. All I'm saying is that the very centralizing force that was there in the Congress might not be at its same strength level.
Yeah, with the sheer number of reduction in seats to just 44.
Yeah, I mean, it's lost most of the main states like UP, you know, all these regional parties are there, BJP is of course there. So if I look at the large picture, the way I see it is that because any empire that's there for a long time has its courtiers.
Absolutely.
So this is true for the Mughal Empire, for every king. Everything creates a coterie around the power base.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And when that power...
So I have to interrupt. You said it creates a coterie, set of courtiers in various spheres. Yeah. So, all these Sahitya Academy Award returnees.
Sure.
Are you just branding them as courtiers?
No, I'm not suggesting that they're all like that. And then also, I think everybody has the right and the ability to lodge whatever protest, whatever feeling they are having. So I think it's very legitimate. Anybody can do it. You know, this is their free right. They want to accept an award. That's their free right to accept it.
Reject it.
If they want to reject it, it's their free right to reject
Absolutely.
it. I have no problem with it whatsoever.
Right.
But what I'm looking at it is what is the phenomenon that's going on, right? So I think people can accept, reject. So for somebody to say, well, I am rejecting this award because some incident happened in Dadri, you know, to me it seems silly. Now to them it might be very legitimate, right? So I'm not denying their feelings or denying their right to think that this is the big thing. But I am rejecting an award from, let's say, Karnataka Sahitya Akademi because in UP some people went and killed some guy because of some issue of a cow. It seems ridiculous.
No, there's some talk. I think the one who started this whole thing was Nehru's niece.
Yes.
Nayantara said.
Yes, I'm actually familiar with her writing.
She's going. I don't know. I mean, some bizarre statements like she's relating that to her return to Dabolkar's killing in Maharashtra.
Yes.
I mean, Modi was not even in the reckoning for the PM back then, I guess.
Yeah,
when that happened.
The funny thing is that I can pre-decide a narrative. I can say today I want to prove that Hindus are being mercilessly killed and persecuted in India. Like this is the narrative I want. I can stitch together a set of incidents that proves this narrative, right? I want to say, if I want to prove that Christians are being persecuted, I can stitch together some and I can prove this, right? I can prove virtually anything if it is just going to be based on anecdotal evidence.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
So what is happening is that you have a pre-decided narrative. The narrative is already decided. It is not emerging because of some incident. Right? The narrative is already decided, and we are simply plugging in these little bits and pieces to prove that this narrative is correct. Right? But it doesn't matter if there wasn't this incident; they'll find some other one to prove that the narrative is correct.
Prove it.
Right?
It has to essentially be proven.
Yeah. In fact, I could take the same argument. Let's say I today wanted to prove that under Obama there is this big right-wing fascist government. Right? Let's say this is the narrative I wanted to
push.
Right?
Yeah.
So I can say, look at all the attacks that happened on Hindus. You know, this old man got thing. There was some temple vandalism that happened. Look at all these race issues that happened. Ferguson happened. All this happened under Obama. Obama is this big racist guy. You know, so if that is the narrative, then we can stitch together an incident. Now, of course, you might say, oh, that narrative is not believable because of this, that, and the other. But the point is that the incidents don't make the narrative any more believable either.
Absolutely.
Right? It's just some random series of incidents that is being deliberately linked to this story. And the story is big bad Hindutva is here. Modi is this evil person who's now the PM, and he has to be opposed to thin nail by all quote right-minded people, right? So that is the background of it, and then there's this, I would call it's a witch hunt. It's a witch hunt that's happening, and the only silly part about it is that we're even talking about it. I mean, really, Modi has done nothing. If you look at it, there are actually key issues that, for instance, Hindu groups feel that are important. Like our constitution, I've written about it earlier, is a communal constitution. It discriminates on the basis of religion.
It does.
Right? So, yes, Modi needs to do some step to stop this discrimination and have a level playing field for everybody. He's actually not done anything. Right? So there's no legislative action that the central government of India has taken after Modi came into place that would lend any credibility to this idea that, you know, some big change is happening on that level. All we have is some random incident happens in UP, which is not ruled by the BJP. True. Some incident happens in Karnataka. Some happens, and then he said, "Oh, this whole world is falling apart. Sky is falling. Look what Modi is doing."
There is another thing here.
Yeah.
I read a piece by Rajiv Srinivasan yesterday in yesterday or day before.
Yeah.
Where he says, you know, this whole drama is orchestrated.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not about any big notion of holy notion of free speech or freedom of expression or whatever the other nice names you want to give it, but the fact that the Bihar elections are ongoing.
Yes. Well, I think there's always, you know, with the staggered election system that we have, there's always going to be some election or the other ongoing, right? And people are going to like for instance, the Dadri one, some people are commenting, well, this is because BJP wants to polarize votes for the Bihar election. Well, guess what? It's the media that blew this out of proportion. So it must be that the media wants to polarize the Bihar election. Whose agenda is it really, right? And so what I look at it also, another like global way to look at it is that you're probably familiar with Noam Chomsky's book, Manufacturing Consent, right? What he's talking about is that the establishment, and he's particularly talking about the US establishment, all of these different newspapers, whether it be New York Times or Washington Post or all these big media, are more or less in consensus.
Yes.
There might be, you know, they're obviously having disagreement about this, that, or the other issue, but there's an overall narrative that still has its integrity that gets pushed.
Yes.
What I would flip it around and I'll introduce this new notion, which is manufacturing dissent. What happens is that the same forces that are globally sort of dominant in the world, for instance the US, which is manufacturing consent in its own society, also benefits from manufacturing dissent in the other society, right? So just like there's a manufacture of consent so it's like the spring, you know, Arab Spring happened.
Various colored so-called revolutions.
Yes, so-called revolutions happened. Yes. So the manufacturing consent forces manufacture dissent in the other outside. And that serves their purpose for the same reason that they manufacture consent.
That's a good point, because if you look at the narrative by most of the mainstream US media folks,
yes,
it could be Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, whoever.
Yes.
I mean, all of those guys.
Yes.
When it comes to India, especially the Modi government and the BJP,
yes,
their line is almost like a photocopy.
Yes.
I mean, open defecation.
Absolutely.
I mean, how did that
suddenly
become a big issue?
I call it like synchronized outrage. It's like synchronized swimming Olympics, where everybody is doing it at exactly the same time on exactly the same issue. It's like a coordinated media attack. Yeah. You know, how did this Dadri incident suddenly got into New York Times and Washington Post, and everybody's writing about it? It's like, how many thousand murders happen, you know, every year? How do you pick up one and you blow it out of proportion? And you don't even know, and then you make it about beef, which it's not even clear it's about beef. You know, it's possible it's about cattle rustling. It's also possible there was some personal enmity that was being used. So there's so many different angles to it. But you kind of make it into a black and white story, which is in Modi's India.
It's always in Modi's India.
Intolerance is rising, and therefore this is happening, where there's absolutely no data that actually establishes it. It is
but it's also
simply rhetoric.
But also it's kind of strange or weird or bizarre. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to put my finger on that. So maybe you can help me. While Modi is, I mean, he's visited the US twice since he became PM.
Yes.
And it looks like all the politicians out there, senators, all those guys, mainstream politicians are mostly making overtures, positive overtures towards him.
Sure.
Whereas the media spin is entirely in the opposite direction.
Yes. Yes.
What explains this? I mean, you've
Well,
lived there for a long time, and
I
what
think
explains this?
I think it is very difficult to understand all the forces that are in play. There is, there were, for instance, groups that were protesting against Modi's visit. They have put up a lot of billboards. There was this whole South Asian academics that wrote this.
Yes, yes, yes.
So in the US also, there's multiple forces at play. There is the business side of the community, which is now becoming more and more open to the India engagement. But I think there is still a lot of old guard, foreign policy, entrenched foreign department kind of people. That had a lot of, for instance, close ties with Pakistan. Recently, somebody got busted also because we know that the Ghulam Nabi case where there was funds flowing from Pakistan to politicians. One of the things we have to remember is that so there's this old some Cold War era suspicious old guard still lying around, and also we have to realize that other countries, for instance Pakistan, invests a huge lot in managing perception of Pakistan
Abroad.
in the US.
Yes.
Whether it's whether it funds to politicians or academics or all these kinds of people, because Pakistan is a client state. I mean, it has to make sure that the master
The master is kept happy.
master is kept in the right spirits. So it's a survival issue for it, right? So that is why it has invested all this infrastructure, and also it's a military state, and therefore it has its own grandiose notion of psychops. I think India is doing psychops all the time, and so it has to counter with So that is kind of the mindset that's coming from. So, on the contrary, India is completely stupid, almost, which is that there is really no systematic government, and when China also takes very proactive care in terms of managing. I mean, people know, academics know in the US that if somebody is writing in China and they're stepping out of line, they're going to
get whacked.
They're going to get whacked. They're going to get into some kind of trouble. Saudi Arabia is funding Islamic studies, and people know that if they're out of line, they're going to get into trouble with their funding, right? So for all these, we think that there is some abstract, objective world of fair play and academia that is out there. It is not. The whole thing is a power play.
It is a power.
Right? So it is a power play.
Political.
At many different levels. I mean, this is the more obvious aspects of power, which is in funding. But of course, even in the academic circles, there's Foucault's idea of, how all these discourses in one way or the other are supporting power, are driven by power, and so on and so forth. So we have to look at it as a power play. And what is happening in the US is that for the first time, really, Indians have also started asserting power, not in terms of the government still remains completely inept, but in terms of the NRI and some of the other forces that are starting to see that we have to participate in the power politics. So there was a very conscious decision actually. There was a Thai meeting I was part of maybe about 12 or 15 years ago where a lot of the group of Indians that were very wealthy saying now we need to become politically active, and US Impact was one of the organizations that was formed.
I recall that.
US India Political Action Caucus.
Late 90s.
Yes.
Sometime in late 90s.
Early 2000s really is when it started really doing much work. So there's a more conscious decision for the Indian community to start engaging, and really you have a very small, very minuscule portion of noisemakers that have become very. Like in their South Asia department, this and that gets used by these different forces.
Yeah. So you mentioned a very interesting point about the Saudis and the Chinese guys.
Yes.
If somebody falls out of line, they'll get into trouble. I mean, by now it is common knowledge that most of the mainstream US universities they have very wealthy chairs funded by China Studies, or either directly by the government of China or through some other intermediaries, whatever.
Yes.
So where is this one Indian equivalent chair or whatever it is,
Right.
which is used as a conscious thing of a foreign policy arm or whatever you want to call it?
Actually, it turns out I think we have a department. I think the culture ministry or somebody has this set of 50 chairs across the world that they fund. But we are just using them stupidly, which is that
that's
it's
precisely my
it's not
point.
being used strategically
Yes,
at all.
that's precisely my point.
And we have in fact anti-India people managing
people
those
managing,
chairs. There's no
yeah.
monitoring.
Yeah.
Nobody's. So we have, as you know, I've been also advising this Dharma Civilization Foundation,
That's right.
which is trying to make a conscious effort to fund chairs as a private initiative, and also put in place the required legal and other facilities that so that somebody who's completely contrary to the mission of the chair is not placed there, and we have some say in how that is done. So that is some private initiative happening, but definitely the government also needs to look at its management of public relations across the globe, since this is a very important. I mean, in the world which is so connected with information, you cannot just be saying, "Oh, we'll just keep heads down and keep doing our work." It might have worked for Modi ji in Gujarat, where all the media was writing all this crap, and he kept working. But I think when he is in charge of the central government, and also you have to realize these darbaris are used to being fed. True. So you have this whole ecosystem of the darbaris and the dalals.
Yes.
The dalals
Dalals,
are being put
yeah,
out of business.
yeah.
And we know that the media was very connected with the Radia tapes and all this stuff, with the whole Dalali network.
Yes, yes.
So you have these dalals that are jobless now, and so all they're going to do is make some
Make
noise,
some noise.
make some noise, and
So they
figure
get
out
some
figure out
ways
their,
to get
their
the
new
crumbs back.
new relevance in
Yeah.
the system, and you can't. And what the Modi ji and other people around him have to realize is that you can't just pull the plug from the Darbari system without creating an alternative.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So you have to either create an alternative, or you have to figure out a way to keep feeding them crumbs or something, because it's.
But you
it's a
think that
very,
will work, feeding them crumbs?
well, it has to be done in a
Because
strategic.
they have a proven and a pretty
Yes.
long track record.
Yes,
so,
yes. I don't think just feeding them crumbs will work. It has to be a combination of fear and greed. This is the basic human emotions,
Absolutely.
And what we have to realize is that all these abstract ideas, and I'm definitely not advocating by any means a dictatorial state or some kind of emergency kind of measures. Not at all. The furthest from it. In fact, I would like to see a very, very free-flowing ecosystem. But what we have to realize is, because of the entrenched interests, that free-flowing ecosystem is not possible.
Yes,
And
yes.
so to create that free flow of ideas, we need to break some of
We
this,
need to break some of this.
break some of the entrenched interests that are out there. Yeah.
On the subject of Darbaris, we come back to again this Sahitya Academy topic.
Yeah.
Let me just read out something. I was pulling this out. Some of the stuff that got Sahitya Academy. I'll just read out something. Please bear with me. My Hindi is not so good. एक बेनाम सी चाहत के लिए आई थी, आप लोगों से मोहब्बत के लिए आई थी, मैं बड़े बूढ़ी की खिदमत के लिए आई थी, एंड सो इट गोज ऑन. मैं दुल्हन बन के भी आई थी इस दरवाजे से, मेरी आरती भी उठेगी इसी दरवाजे से. This won the Sahitya Academy, and this is I mean, you know who this poem is referring to, Sonia Gandhi. And then there's this other poem. I'll read out this. No, I mean, it's beyond funny. Okay, here. Okay, this poem is titled Ham Sandwich. I have a ham sandwich in my fridge. Deep fried ham with a full stop after that. Wheat bread full stop. But that won't suffice, will it? I can get you some sauce. What would you do? How about some sausages as well? And I'll spread some butter over the bread. Would that be good enough? Hey, listen. Or do you want something completely else? I could get you poha or paratha from the next lane. I'm just wondering what the fuck will make you have breakfast with me again. So this one Sahitya Academy. I mean, this is a bunch of these poems out here.
Well, I don't want to get into literary criticism, because
no, but
because there's probably a
criticism.
yeah.
I mean, it's so bizarre. I mean, I don't even know what to say to this kind of stuff. And this once wins cash prizes worth some 50,000 or 5 lakhs,
Yes.
whatever. Apart from the perks, fellowships and travel and some grant and some heading this chair or that chair. I mean, what is happening here?
I think what happens is that it is really a breakdown of two things. It's a breakdown of the academic culture in India, and from there the intellectual culture of India. So I would even take it back one step, which is that if only it was a problem of some stupid people getting Sahitya Akademi Awards, it would be fine. The problem is we have an entire university system which is generating millions and millions of degrees which are completely useless. Which nobody has learned anything in. They're doing some political science, some sociology, some this and the other. It's useless. They haven't learned anything. They haven't learned to think. They haven't learned to critically analyze these ideas. It is like some rote idea that they're taking and they're repeating, they're mugging up, they're succeeding, and nobody has actually learned anything, and those degrees when they graduate they're worthless. They're not even worth the paper they're printed on. So what the malice is much deeper. The malice comes from the fact that we have lost the stream of the intellectual tradition that made India rich.
This is very valid, and it's very important because this was a land that people came since millennia for learning, education, knowledge, wisdom, spirituality, philosophy.
Yes.
And I mean, one doesn't know what to say. There's one entire coterie which is hell bent on destroying all these things.
Absolutely, and also I think it is there's the whole discussion on the clash of civilizations, and I have some disagreement with Huntington's thesis, but I think it is worth at least acknowledging that there is a set of people that view the world as a clash of civilizations. Whether you agree with the thesis in entirety or not, but that thesis itself shows that some people think of the world as a clash of civilizations. So if you take that fact forward, you see that in India there is a manifestation of that civilizational clash that is actually playing out in India itself. There are people who see that the Indic civilization, the Indian civilization has produced some value, not only in the past but has some relevant value for the problems of today for the world. And there are a set of people who believe that the Indic civilization is not a solution to problems, it is really the source of all problems, at least in India. And therefore it has to be eliminated. Right? So a lot of the superficial level fight, so there is the power thing that we've already talked about, it's happening as a power play. But the other part of it is happening because people have vested themselves in saying that we actually don't believe the Indian civilization has to survive. It is oppressive, it is this, it is that. All this narrative is built on. And so they are doing from their own, so I'm being generous here, from their own integrity, they're trying to attack the system, to attack the civilization really. So some of this conflict is happening at that level, and it's very difficult to create an intellectual climate unless, when China is creating a response, even now, there's a huge impetus to have the communism relate back to Confucianism, right? They're doing a lot of work.
Doing it. Yeah, I believe they started this some 20 years back.
Yes,
right?
yes, and I was just in China earlier this year, and I was actually very surprised, remarkably surprised, despite their cultural revolution, that wiped out so much, that they have maintained an integrity of civilizational continuity still. And I'll give you a very mundane example, which is that you go into a restaurant and they serve you hot water or they serve you tea.
Right.
Now this is Ayurvedically correct.
Yes.
From an Ayurvedic point of view, drinking ice water before food is about the worst thing you can do for your digestion, right? And now if you go to an Indian restaurant, nobody serves you hot water.
They'll give you a bottle of cold biscuit.
Yeah, they'll give you cold bisleri, they'll do this, that and the other. So in very, very simple things, and of course you can go to language from there. Like I was in Beijing and I was eating at a very high-end restaurant in Beijing. So we wanted to order something, and not a single person in this restaurant spoke English. Not the waiters, not the manager, not the senior manager. Nobody spoke a word of English. This is like a fancy restaurant in the capital of China. And of course in India we're saying, oh, everybody in China is learning English. Even China is running after English. Where are they getting this information from? It's not true at all. And in fact, I stayed with an English language teacher in China. In Beijing. Actually in Xi'an, when I was in Xi'an, I stayed with an English language teacher and I asked her about English in China. And she said, the Chinese government has now started de-emphasizing English. There was a point when they were at least encouraging people to learn or making it compulsory in schools. But now they're de-emphasizing it, and they're saying really Chinese is going to take over, so we don't have to bother. And they're funding huge scholarships for Chinese studies because they see this as part of the civilizational battle.
So you see, it's not just a civilizational battle, it goes maybe much beyond and deeper than that.
Yes.
It's just a way of casually asserting. She's a Chinese citizen.
Yes.
It's just a way of casually asserting the confidence in their own selves.
Yes, absolutely.
Where is this missing? Why is this missing in India?
Well,
I mean, what is this sort of deracination, or however we want to put it?
Yes. So I think it started off from the intellectual. I mean, if you look at what is our university system, all of the universities that are set up today are universities that were either set up in the British times
Or modeled after.
or they were modeled after them, right? More or less all of the traditional schools of learning were marginalized or destroyed, right? And not only that, we created a climate, it's this intellectual climate, where the only discourse that matters is the discourse that's taking place in English, for instance. On the intellectual, which is not true, of course. There is so much rich discourse happening in Kannada, for instance, or, in Bengali or other things. But we've created this feeling that is what matters. And it is also tying deeply to economics. So, you were asking about the language issue earlier. What is happening is that लोग मुझे कह रहे हैं कि अरे आजकल तो गांव का बच्चा भी जो चपरासी का बच्चा है वो भी अपने अंग्रेजी माध्यम स्कूल में बच्चे को पढ़ाना चाह रहा है ना जो चपरासी है तो आप तो सब लोग अंग्रेजी चाह रहे हो और आप अपनी भाषा की बात कर रहे हो ये क्या ये तो आप लोगों को पिछड़ा करना चाह रहे हो ये लोग मुझे कहते हैं सो माई रिस्पॉन्स टू दैट इज the reason why the chaprasi's son wants to send his child to English medium is because we've created an entire system from the top down that is creating linguistic apartheid, which is a linguistic apartheid system, which is saying that if you want to compete in higher education, if you want to study engineering, these are all the lucrative professions. You want to study engineering, you want to study medicine, you want to study business. All those are exclusively available in this apartheid system in English. So, of course, there's going to be a horde towards English. But this is not happening because of some global inevitability of English. Because if you go to...
I don't think there's any such global inevitability that existed especially pertaining to English at any time in the world.
No, it doesn't even exist now. I mean, if you go... I mean, I've been to about 25 countries just to look at this language issue. And what I found was that if you go to China, they're all using Chinese. They're using Chinese. I mean, if you go to my site, bhashaniti.org, I have samples of how the Chinese are learning programming, and they're learning programming
in Chinese.
Mandarin. I mean, I have the books there. You can go and read them. I mean, the only part you can read is there's a book on Python programming, and the only part is it is a byte of Python which was written by an Indian fellow in English that they translated into Chinese, and that's how they're learning programming. And if you go to you go to small countries, go to Poland. I was in Poland and I was talking to a 5th year electrical engineering student. And I asked him, what do you study in electrical engineering? What language are you using? He says Polish. So I said, is there an English language requirement? He says, no, maybe at the PhD level or something, there's some language, but all our studies are still in Polish, even if they have some language thing. So I said, how do you do this? How do you make all this translation effort? All this electrical engineering stuff is being written, in English. He says, no, it's not written in English. All our Polish professors are in Polish only. They write the books. So all our stuff is being written in Polish. So, yeah, maybe for some reading, some paper or something, you can learn some English for reading level. But you don't have to produce the knowledge in English. You produce it in Polish, and all the knowledge production is happening in Polish. And same, in South Korea, the CEO of Samsung did his MBA from Korean medium. And Samsung is the biggest electronic multinational company in the world. When I talk about this in India, I say, oh, multinationals require English. No, they don't require English. You stupid Indians,
It is
like our slave mind has created this idea that English is ubiquitous and it's necessary, right? But it is not true. It is not a fact at all. All these companies localize. Do you think Samsung, when it's operating in France, is operating in English? They're going to be driven out, They try doing that. They're using French. In fact, it's a requirement of the French government that if you're providing software to the government, the manuals, instructions have to be in French or they're not going to buy it.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, right now, even here, if you buy it,
Yeah.
it's only in India that, for whatever, some high-end LED TV,
Yeah.
Samsung, LG, whatever,
Yeah.
you'll have the user manual in English, in French,
Yes.
Arabic,
Yes.
Polish,
Yes.
Spanish,
And Korean and Chinese.
Korean, Chinese,
But not in Hindi.
but
And not
Hindi.
in Kannada.
Not in Hindi.
Right? And not in our language. So it is coming because of our own disrespect. It is not coming because of a global need. It is not coming because of a global inevitability. It is coming because we have disrespected our own languages, we have disrespected our own culture. How do we expect anybody else to respect it? Right? And also it is coming from direct state policy. Like in China, Walmart was recently fined. Why were
Yeah.
were they fined? They were fined because they were selling some product in which the label that was in English was slightly bigger than the Chinese label. The Chinese label was there. It wasn't that the Chinese label wasn't there, but the font size,
Size matters.
the font size of the English label was slightly bigger, and that was enough to fine Walmart.
Wow.
And look at in India, we think it is all happening, free market is happening. No, countries are protecting their culture. Countries are taking steps to protect their language, to advance their civilization. They're not just saying, "Come and kill us, we are ready." only
This
this Adarsh liberal segment is saying this.
This reminds me of,
Yeah.
I don't know, one of those, whatever passes for in the name of lit fests.
Yeah.
Suhail Seth was proudly proclaiming
Yes.
on stage that, it's all okay, the past and all, Mughals came in, these guys came in, Turks came in.
Yeah.
But look at the bright side.
Yeah.
They gave us tandoori, they gave us some
Right,
kebab,
right.
they gave us this,
Yes,
they gave us
yes.
that.
Yes.
And so I think some other person countered that with saying, so by the same logic, if you take your own logic forward,
Yes.
tomorrow some other guy will come and invade us and give us noodles, so
Yeah,
therefore good.
Yes.
So-
No, I was there actually. It was in the Jaipur Literary Festival,
whatever.
and Rajiv Malhotra counted.
Oh, that was Rajiv.
Yeah, Rajiv.
Okay.
And I think he's like, this is the invasion theory of India. It's like all progress has to happen because somebody invades us.
Somebody invades
because we are
us.
completely incapable of progressing on our
Yes,
own.
yes.
So now next we have to invite the Americans and then the Chinese to come invade us so we can progress.
Which is already happening.
Which is happening.
Which is happening. All this open letters to the US guys and the 65
yeah. And
MPs
we are
writing
this
letters.
whole NGO dhanda
Nexus, huh?
is part of the same thing, where the Ford Foundations and so on and so forth. So what we have is, at some level, it is a civilizational battle, and we have faced these, and there are people that are, I think Rajiv used the word sepoys, which is logical, and there are people that are firing for the other side, and we have to see it for what it is, and we have to counter it from an intellectual base, and also from an adhyatmic base, and I say that deliberately because, as you might know, I teach the Art of Living course in the United States, and people are hungry for this.
Okay.
I've also taught in the prison system in Seattle, for instance, in the jails.
Okay.
And I've had people come to me after teaching them the course and saying, if I had this practice and if I had this knowledge that I have now, I wouldn't be in jail. This is somebody who's in America, an American telling me this after they've done the course.
This is a very interesting point because on the other side,
Yes.
diametrically opposite side, you have all these guys across the world actually,
Yes.
in the prison systems across
Yeah.
the Western world at least.
Sure.
A lot of conversion into Islam is happening inside the jail
Yes,
with
definitely.
hardened criminals.
Yes.
And then on this side you
Yes.
shared what we just shared, your experience
Absolutely.
of
Yeah, in
getting
fact,
them
there's many
spirituality.
stories I can tell them. And there was one of the courses. There was a big black African American guy. Everybody was a little bit afraid of him. They were giving him a lot of room, And so the first time he didn't say anything. He was very silent. He was just in the back. So first day he didn't say anything. Second day he didn't say anything. Third day I was doing this yoga stretch. So I was stretching my hands like this, and he was behind me and I smacked him. He was just entering the room.
So it was just-
And like the whole room was still. It's like, what is going to happen
That's
next?
it, Sankrant. End of
So
story.
nothing happened. That guy just went and sat. And then at the end of that day, he started sharing, and he had tears in his eyes. He says, I actually run the Christian group in this prison. And the only reason I joined your course was to refute it. I joined your course to prove you wrong. I wanted to know what you're teaching because I knew you were going to lead people astray and lead them,
Into
and-
darkness.
Yeah, so I was here to refute you. And he says, but what you have done, you have made a believer out of me. And he had tears in his eyes. He says, it's the first time I felt that I was in touch with who I am. So this is, and this is, we're talking about hardened criminals.
Yes.
This is the effect that our tradition, the value that this is in a 3-day course in a jail, that we can provide so much transformation. And people are hungry for this because, in some senses, Western society is a very fragmented society. People are hungry for connection.
Yes.
So there's there's a huge amount of isolated. I mean, I think about more than 10% of America is on depression medication.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is the level of the state of society, and this is what we want to copy. This is what we are saying. Oh, we need to
We
copy.
already copied. I
Yeah.
mean, if you look at most of our urban, whatever, big metropolises,
Yeah.
this at some other level, this is already happening.
Yes, yes. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't learn anything from the West. In fact, I'd written a whole article saying what India can learn from America. So there is absolutely things that we can learn. But how to manage society is not one of the things to learn.
Absolutely.
How to get better roads? Yes.
Yes.
How to manage local government? Maybe.
Maybe.
Right?
Maybe.
But
Definitely not how to manage
But their
society.
social systems are not in any shape or form better than what we have. And what we need to do is we need to not look at the past, but we need to learn from the past. And we need to say, okay, what is it that is of value that we can carry forward? And what is it that we can learn? But we can only make that choice if we have our own ground to stand on. Right? If we don't have any ground to stand on, if our ground is already their ground, then we are not even in a position to make a choice. Right? And that is really the problem which I see with a lot of the academic studies, a lot of these intellectuals, so-called liberal and so on and so forth, in India. They have no ground. They don't know where they're speaking from. Or their ground is already alien. So,
Right. So, I think, there's a lot we can
yes,
talk.
yes.
And since it's not an interview, there's no constraints as such. So, I
Yeah.
guess we'll close here.
Yes, we should close.
And maybe next time.
Yes.
Thanks, Sankrant. It's
Always a
wonderful
pleasure.
talking to you.
Always a pleasure. So nice being here in this beautiful setting.
Yeah.